This edition of Mac Voices is brought to you by Smile, the makers of the brand new PDF Pen 6, PDF Pen Pro 6, and PDF Pen for iPad and PDF Pen for iPhone. Find out more about all the flavors of PDF Pen at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to Mac Notables on Mac Voices. This is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. I'm Chuck Joyner. We've got Chris Breen back to talk about all kind of interesting things. But Chris, when was anything you said ever uninteresting?
I think last November I said something uninteresting, and the world let me know.
Yeah, that was about it. It's good to see you. It was good to see you at Macworld. It was a great time, as always.
It was fun, and this time I brought my family with me, and this is the first time they've come. So it was really fun for them. My daughter just thought it was the greatest thing ever. So she'll be back each and every year, I think.
Good. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to meet her. I know we talked about it, but then we sort of went separate ways, and you know, that's just the nature of that event, that everybody's busy, and especially you have so many obligations.
Well, I have some, but I think you were constantly on. Every time I saw you, you were lugging that camera around with you on that on the monopod. It's like, wow, and you had an awful lot of footage that came out of it. So I think you were the more busy person on that particular show.
I make myself busy is what it amounts to, but you know, it's always a blast.
Yeah.
So if it was last November that you said something uninteresting and you say the world let you know, I would assume that they probably let you know through the social networks. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is your presence, I guess notably on Twitter and app.net. And I'm curious, first of all, why you are on app.net. I am too, so that's not a shot. It's just, why did you opt to go over there and support that particular platform?
Well, I think with a lot of these social networking services, including Facebook, they get to a point where they start out and they say, we're going to offer you this great thing and it's going to be free. And you say, that sounds wonderful. I'm going to participate in that. And then they get enough critical mass, they get enough people participating in these things. They said, and now we're going to make some money. And the way they make money is on the backs of their users. And I have no problem with them trying to do that. It doesn't mean that I have to continue to support them, however. So I left Facebook for that reason. Twitter, when it started limiting things that third parties could do, limiting their APIs so that it was driving more traffic to Twitter's clients instead of third parties, I wanted a backup plan. I like Twitter a lot, but I can kind of see the writing on the wall that Twitter is going to continue to monetize this thing in ways that may not be beneficial to all its users. So I wanted something else, and I like the idea of app.net in that they're saying, our model is not advertising, rather you pay and you can come here and play. And it's $50 a year, or it was at the time. And I thought that was a reasonable thing to do. A lot of the people I knew on Twitter that I followed were going to app.net. I said, great, I'll go there as well. So I have accounts on both of the services. I use them differently at this point, and I'm going to have to see how my usage patterns change over time. But Twitter is a different sort of platform for me than is app.net. So I tend to be chattier on Twitter and less so on app.net.
Okay, chattier. I want to explore that. But I do want to comment. I agree with the idea of a pay-for social network. I like it. I know that one of the big criticisms is, now it's an elitist kind of thing. You have the money to pay for it. And I don't see it that way. I think your point is so well taken that I would like an option that is not advertiser supported, not because I disagree with that, but because sometimes of the way it's implemented, a la Facebook. That just...
Right.
They're the poster boy.
Yeah, and I think it's the same way that that software is. You can say that purchasing software is elitist because you get to use it instead of freeware, or an advertising-driven kind of software. I don't think that's elitist. I just think I'm willing to pay for good work. And so far, what I've seen on app.net is good work, and I appreciate the time they've put into it, their philosophy behind the service. So I don't mind paying for it. And those that do, actually, they're starting to give away some free passes now so that people can get in with more limited access to it, but can still participate in a lot of ways they would on Twitter. So good for them for doing that as well, because it's increasing the number of people there. So I'm seeing a lot of the same people on Twitter and app.net. But again, app.net seems cleaner to me than does Twitter.
And it presents a challenge. If you're on a social network, the odds are that you want to be somewhere that people can connect with you and you can connect with people. It's a two-way street. So do you have two personalities? You say you're chattier on one than the other. Do you have two personalities that you kind of relegate to each one? And how do you handle the cross-posting issue? That seems to be a hot one.
Yeah, I do. I have very distinct personalities on each one. On Twitter, I'm kind of an idiot, and I try to be a funny idiot, but I say things primarily to get a laugh. Sometimes just to make people think, or sometimes just to make people mad. And then on app.net, I don't feel it's that way. It's Jason Snell described it as a clubhouse, and it really is much more that way. There are people in there who are far more my peers. They're not kind of like people that follow me because I have my name in a magazine or on a website, but they're developers, they're other journalists, they're technologists. Over there, I don't really feel like being that much of an idiot because I think, one, it's preaching to the choir. I can be snarky on Twitter to try to make a point. The people on app.net already get it. I don't need to do that. They get the joke. I don't need to make that joke, or somebody else has made the joke or the point better than I have. So in that instance, I really tend to post about technology or questions or technical questions I have. If I'm looking for a decent client for some kind of service, I'll ask on app.net because those people know that stuff. And occasionally I'll answer other people's questions. On Twitter, again, I'm chattier. Although in the last few days, I'm changing my Twitter approach as well. I'm trying to be less of an idiot or to the point where I'm being less snarky. And that comes from reviewing a lot of my posts on Twitter, where I realize 80% of the time I'm being snarky, and what am I really contributing to anything other than trying to get a laugh? And sometimes that snark is a little mean-spirited, and I don't really want to be that person, but I am sometimes. And so I've decided to just sort of implement this no snark policy. Plus, I see a lot of other stuff on Twitter where lots of people are doing that. Snark is really easy. It's an easy way to make a point. It's an easy way to get a laugh. And ultimately, is that what I want social networking to be about? And I'm not sure I do. So I thought I would try to put my money where my mouth is and cut down on my own snark and see if I can do it. And what's been interesting in the last few days is the number of times I'm tempted to be snarky. I'll read somebody's thing and I'll go, oh, let me go get that. And then I have to say, no, there's a no snark policy, so I can't and I won't. And it really has cut down the number of times I post, but also it's given me kind of a cheerier outlook at the end of the day where I don't feel like, wow, I was just really mean to somebody and that maybe wasn't appropriate. So I don't know. We'll see how long this lasts. I'm sorely tempted sometimes to just put a little dig in there, and I'm trying not to, but we'll see.
I really admire you for stepping back and looking at your own tweets. And it's funny, of all the people that I follow on Twitter, you're not one of the ones that I would have put in the top snark category.
No, I don't follow those people, though.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not looking at the right people, but it does seem like that has become a lot, that, reactionary posts, sometimes judgmental posts, but with the wrong attitude. You're right, not adding necessarily anything to the conversation. Now, look, we all crack a joke once in a while, and that's fine. But when it becomes a steady stream, then it does make me want to unfollow somebody, or at the very worst, or at the very least, not take them seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly not judging anybody else on this because I've been certainly guilty of it myself, and I'm still on the fence about it, whether I'll put a little snark in. I mean, as you know, during the political season, I tweet a lot of political stuff, but I try to hashtag it with a politics hashtag so that people who don't want to see that stuff can filter it out. I tend to get ultra snarky when it's politics time because I'm very much set in my political ways. I was raised in a political family and I have views and I'm not afraid to express them. And if people then respond to me by saying, well, I didn't follow you for this reason, my reaction is, I didn't ask you to follow me, so you can unfollow and you won't have to see that stuff. But as far as what other people do, I'm not judging what they do. I think sometimes the snark works really well if somebody's good at it. Other times it just seems to be that somebody's angry all the time. And I had enough feedback where I thought, I don't want people to view me that way. I am snarky. I admit it, but I don't want to be publicly snarky to the point where people just say, this guy's really a jerk. So again, experiment. We'll see what happens.
And I'm surprised that you say, even with all this going on, that on Twitter you feel like you're more chatty. If app.net is a clubhouse, I would have thought that's where you would have been more chatty, because that's where you would at least theoretically feel more comfortable.
It's kind of a different crowd. One is that I have far fewer followers on app.net. It's most of us do, because it's a newer service. So on app.net, I have 300 or something followers, whereas I have thousands on Twitter. And so that's sort of it's like playing to a different room. And people follow me for different reasons on Twitter. Some of them follow me because I'm a musician, and other people follow me because of the work I do for Macworld and other places. Some people follow me because I'm doing MacBreak Weekly every so often, or I'm writing for the magazine app now. So it's a more diverse group. There are enough of them that I don't feel bad if somebody unfollows me. App.net, I feel a little worse about it, though. I thought, oh, what did I do wow, this guy's smarter than me. He's not following me anymore. So, I guess I better get my game up a little better. Nah, I don't.
Yeah. And Chris, you're an easy interview. That's another interesting thing. Get your game up. I think we all are developing a social media game if we have anything to say that we want to have heard. And that seems contrary to maybe what at least initially social media was supposed to be. Has marketing invaded social media to that degree that we're all doing it?
Oh, sure. I mean, certainly I look at everybody in my family, and they're posting pictures to Facebook, and they said, oh, did you see blah, blah, blah? And I said, no, I'm not on Facebook. And they all look at me like I'm this weirdo for not. And then, and I don't want to go into the speech of why I'm not on Facebook. I just say, no, I'm not. So if you want to send me pictures, do it the old fashioned way. They could put them on Flickr. They could put them on one of these other photo sites. They could send them to me, but they say, no, we're on Facebook, and this is what we do. So it's become the default now for people to be on Facebook, and to a degree to be on Twitter now. I don't know if it's marketing or if it's simply that we're realizing that's the way you reach people now. If I need to get in contact with somebody, email may not be the best solution anymore. It now may be that I need to tweet them very quickly, or if I were on Facebook, do something on Facebook, and then I can reconnect with them that way. The way we communicate is changing quite a bit, and younger people are not using email nearly as much as we do, because for them, they have a different communication standard than we grew up with, I guess.
Yeah, and that's something that everybody's adjusting to. As some of those younger people start getting into the workplace, they have different expectations about their ability to access their social networks during what would traditionally be considered work time. That's leading to conflicts.
It does, but I think enlightened employers understand that this is part of people's lives, as long as it's, the way we work at Macworld, because I work off-site, our standard is get your work done. I don't have to get my work done between 9 and 5. I just have to get my work done. I know what my work is. They know what my work is, and I turn it in. It gets published, and everything's good. If I didn't turn my work in, that's the point where, Jason comes to my house and walks in the door and says, what's going on here? And, nothing, just tweeting away. Yeah, so if somebody saw, because it is public. So if you're on Facebook all the time, or you're on Twitter all the time, and you're not getting your work done, it's pretty clear that you're not focusing where you should be. So an enlightened employer, as long as people are getting the work done, great. You're attending meetings, good. You show up on time, that's great. Otherwise, if you have this record of being on social networking all the time and your work has suffered because of it, of course your employer has absolutely the right to do something about it, and either give you a good talking to, which I think is the first thing to do. And after that, it's just start shutting down some of your access to these things, because you're not doing what you're paid to do.
Right. But at the same time, I think it's worth pointing out that these networks can be incredibly valuable. Sometimes I will tap my social network for information I need for a project at work, and usually get the answer back, or an answer. And that is something that I think employers really need to understand, that you're maintaining a social network for yourself, but it also has implications. Just like if we were talking about, our friends at, I don't know, the lodge, the swimming pool, the country club, wherever it is that you socialize, you reach out to those people first. This is just a little different because you're reaching out globally and in a very public forum.
Right. Yeah, I routinely go on Twitter to ask people for recommendations or for help with something. If I'm researching a Mac 911 question, for example, maybe I've got most of the question. I think, well, I might be missing a piece, and I'll throw a little tidbit out there. It's saying, I've got this, what else? And sometimes they'll say, no, that covers it. Or other times they say, you totally missed this bit, which turns out to be the most important part. So it can be an incredibly valuable resource, particularly for getting recommendations. I think this is what marketers and advertisers are trying to do, and they're trying to push this social networking angle where, my best recommendations come from people I follow. If I need to know about some video editor or some game or something else I want, I'll tweet that out. People who I trust will come back to me and say, this is what you should get. I have no problem whatsoever saying, good, I trust you, bye. That's incredibly powerful. Now, Facebook would like to have that power. Twitter would like to have that power. And right now, I don't trust them enough to give them that power. But I certainly do trust the people I know and care about.
The newest version of PDF Pen from Smile is here. PDF Pen 6 can now export to Microsoft Word format and sports a new editing bar for faster access to tools and properties. PDF Pen 6 is also fully optimized for Retina displays, so it looks better than ever. And Mac OS X features autosave and versions are now fully supported. The new PDF Pen Pro 6 includes all that, plus gives users more control over document permission settings that restrict saving, printing, and copying, and simplifies creation of cross-platform interactive PDFs. Find out not only about all these new features, but all the capabilities of PDF Pen and PDF Pen Pro at smilesoftware.com. Well, since apparently Jason hasn't had to come and talk to you recently, you're getting
well,
your
he
work
couldn't
done.
get in the door. It's so crowded here.
Let's talk about some of your work. One piece in particular is, you're known as the Mac 911 guy, but you are also becoming known as the Mac 101 guy, which I don't know what the next set of numbers is, but why did you decide to take on the very basics, I guess, of the Macintosh?
A lot of it was just a writing experiment for me. The idea behind Mac 101, and other people have used this title as well, so it's not that I woke up in the middle of the night that came up with it, but it is sort of the basics of the Mac. The experiment was, how do you explain to somebody who's a brand new user how to use the Mac? And so I've seen people take this approach, but it tends to be pretty scattershot. That they'll say, okay, well, I'll explain one basic and I'll explain this other basic, and here's a different kind of basic, and then they take a vacation, and then 3 weeks later there's another basic, but they don't seem to connect in any logical way. And what I really wanted to do is try to explain the Mac OS computing experience from the ground up in a logical, serial fashion, so that we really go from, you need to install, or you've just purchased a new Mac, you open it up, what happens? So the first lesson is what happens when you open your Mac, and then we take tours of the Finder. Finally, and explain things as simple as, what's a window? How do you right click? What's this control click thing about? Really eschewing any assumptions you have about what the Mac is, because we take so many things for granted, like, well, everybody knows this. Well, no, they don't. A lot of people are coming from Windows, or that's their first computer a lot of times, and these are older people who've been given an iMac by a well-meaning daughter or son, and they go, here's your Mac, it's simple to use, and they turn the thing on and go, I don't have any idea what to do with this. So the experiment was to try to see if I could explain from beginning to the end how this thing works. And at the beginning, that was pretty easy to do, and now I'm sort of getting to the point where I could fork one way or fork the other way, or yet take a third or fourth direction. I'm just finishing up system preferences now at a beginner's level, so not getting into the really deep stuff because I don't want to confuse people. And now I'm going to be turning into mail and probably do 4 or 5 columns just on mail.
Some people would think this should be beneath you. I mean, you're Chris Breen. But I'm just the opposite. I think this is an incredibly difficult process because of all the biases, because of all the knowledge that you already have, the fact that we all have customized our Macs way beyond what comes out of the box, not to the point of being unrecognizable, but to the point of some of the utilities and customizations I've done. I don't even remember I did them. They're so integrated into my thinking. So to step back and look at that requires a lot of challenge. I mean, did you find some poor victim that had never touched a Mac before to help guide you, or did you just get a new Mac and open it up and kind of start from there?
Well, I've certainly helped family members, I think, as we all have. And so that's a real wake-up call for a lot of us, is when somebody calls you, it'd be my mother or my sister, and they start asking you these questions, and you just think, how do you not know that? I mean, it's, you're trying to tell somebody how to close a window. I said, you see the red button, and it turns out there are 3 different red things on the screen, and they're clicking on everything. And they're going, no, what are you talking about? Well, up in the corner of the window. What's the window? This thing? No. And so, and I also speak to a lot of users groups. And in users groups, there tend to be people of varying degrees of experience. And so a lot of people, I think, who run users groups have been doing this for a long time. And they have these assumptions as well. And they get some newbies in here who I think, frankly, get scared off because they ask a question and maybe they're condescended to a little bit, or they're given an answer that assumes they know things that they don't know. So I don't think it's beneath me at all. I like explaining things. It's one of the things I'm good at. So for me, I feel like, one, I'm paying back all the help I've gained over the years from other people. And I like to see I like to see the light come on over people's heads. And even if it's something as simple as them understanding how to use a certain menu command that they didn't know about before, or they understand that there is such a thing as a right click, and they find their computer use is now much more powerful than it once was before. So I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And again, as a writer, it's an interesting experiment to see how I can do it and see how far I can get with it. This is going to go on for at least a year, and I expect probably longer than that. I think maybe when we get to the end, it will become a book of some kind, probably an ebook through Macworld. But I think it's fascinating. So I love doing it. Macworld was great about it. I just proposed it, said I'd really like to take this on and do this. And they said, all right, every Thursday it's yours. So every Thursday you can tune in and check out the next lesson. And even for people who are experienced, I try to encourage them to give it people who aren't experienced. So if somebody's gotten a new Mac or they know they're not using it, send them a link to the thing and say, start here. They're all at progressive order. Just read from the bottom to the top. And by the time you do, you're going to know quite a bit about your Mac, more than most people do.
What kind of reaction have you had from the readers, Chris? Especially given what you would normally write.
I think the responses I've gotten are very nice. They're very positive. People who are experienced read them anyway, and every so often they go, I had no idea that worked that way. Because, I mean, we all have little gaps. And so even though this is presented as beginner material, I throw in stuff that is fairly comprehensive about how this works. So there are things that we miss over time. And others say, this is great. I'm sending my mother here. She reads it religiously every week. Or father. I'm sorry I pick on my mother, but it's, my mother's my one living parent. So she's the one that I cite. But fathers too, and it's uncles. And then users groups. Often they will refer their members to these things. So those people who would normally come in for that Saturday beginning Mac class, they'll read some of this stuff, and then if they have questions, then they can go to their user group and say, I read this in Mac 101. This part doesn't make sense to me. So that gives those people somewhere to jump off from.
It's good. It's good. Again, I admire you for it. I think it's terrific. Because I know I find myself trying to answer basic questions, and sometimes it gets frustrating for a lot of reasons. Yeah. Sometimes just what you said, how can you not know what a window is? Right. It's the 21st century. Come on. It's a mouse. How could you not know what a mouse or a trackpad is? But there are still an amazing number of people out there that just haven't had the experience.
Yeah. And again, people miss things. So it's, it's not anything to be impressed about. I'm having a ball.
Oh, good. Hey, that cuts down on the snark to the question.
It does a little bit.
So why don't we jump back into snark a little bit?
All right.
And because, as always, we do have some idea of where these conversations are going to go. And one of the things we both wanted to touch on was the whole Apple fanboyism and sometimes the negative manifestations we're seeing, most notably recently with one of our own. Andy Anako really got kind of pounded in a number of places for saying that he had switched over to the Android phone.
Right.
And while I was surprised, this is the community that talks about finding the best tools. And for Andy, he found something that suited him better. What's the big deal?
Well, I mean, people, fans are fans because fan is short for fanatical. And there are members of our little support group, people who love Apple, particularly people who've been using Apple stuff for a long time. I think some of them haven't gotten over the survivor mentality. It's sort of like looking at people that came up through the Depression and they're still hiding, they're stockpiling stuff under the bed, for that day when the Depression comes back again. And I think these people have gone through Apple's beleaguered years where we loved Apple and we were promoting the products as much as we could because we loved them so much. We wanted them to survive. They were great. Apple was making great stuff. The PC stuff we saw was bad, and we didn't understand why didn't everybody love Apple. Well, people have caught on now. That attitude is out. We've outlived that attitude, but some people can't let it go. So when there's talk of Apple somehow failing, and granted, we're seeing a lot of kind of mainstream press now, people saying, "Oh, well, Apple hasn't developed a flying car, and so they're doomed." And I think some of that press is unfair. But I do think when somebody like Andy Ihnatko, who has had experience with computers since he was about this tall, and has been very fair about it, and he's one of the brightest guys I know, and also he's a personal friend of mine. So I know Andy well, and he's just a gentleman. When some people come into our forums and react and say, "Well, you're a traitor to Apple, or you're on the take, or you're doing this for hits, or you're doing this for this, that, or the other thing." I mean, everything except what is the truth, which is, here's a guy who spends a lot of time with technology, who evaluates what is right for him, and makes a choice. I mean, this was not an easy thing for him to do. He is known as an Apple guy. He's been writing about Apple forever, and he's been very positive about Apple for years and years, as have we all, because they make good stuff. But at this point, he decides to use a different phone. He's still using the iPad. He's still using his other Apple stuff. And people turn on him like dogs. And I just thought, at this point, this whole Apple fanboyism thing has gone too far. That when somebody who is this knowledgeable is doing this in a sincere way and saying, "This is for me, not for you. This is what I'm doing," and to have people chew him up like that is disgraceful. And so I don't know what there is to do about it, but I just think it's like seeing drunken soccer fans in England. I mean, basically these the soccer bullies or soccer rowdies. I just think it's too bad because it makes us look bad. And I'm sure that you've seen over the years is when people find out what you do in terms of Apple, who aren't Apple people, they kind of cringe because they know they're going to get the talk that we're all going to say, "Oh, you're using a PC? Well, you're an idiot. And here's why Apple is great." And I tell people what I do, and I still get that. The people who don't use Apple stuff, they kind of go, "Oh," and they apologize for not using Apple stuff because they're using a PC or they're using an Android phone or something. I don't care. Whatever you want to use that works for you, that's fine. I don't care. But it's, that those people have been hit on by the fanboys so many times now that they expect all of us to behave that way. So it makes the rest of us look bad. It makes them look bad, and they don't need to be so feisty about it. So that's my rant about the fanboys. I wish those that can't turn it down would just go somewhere else, just leave. And others, again, realize that this defensive attitude is not serving anybody. It doesn't make them look good. It doesn't make the rest of us look good. They're not helping Apple. Apple doesn't really care about these people that much. So when the day comes that they're beleaguered, they can pull out their Apple flags again and start waving them and telling people about how wonderful Apple is. But for now, just set it aside, calm down. If somebody wants to use an Android phone, let them. Android is quite good these days, and some of the hardware that Android is shipping on is quite good. So people really now have an honest choice to make, and some people are going to choose Apple, and other people are going to choose other platforms.
I want to make sure that before I forget it, and I'll have a link in the show notes, that you had a great conversation with Andy on the Macworld podcast, at which point, and Andy, as you said, he's a gentleman. He is extremely intelligent. He outlined why it was good for him. He talked about some of the reactions he got. It is a wonderful conversation if you're interested in this particular topic. I guess the fanboyism, I can be guilty too. When the PC at work goes bad, I'm cursing Bill Gates and
Sure.
Ballmer and their mothers and everybody else, because it just seems that there's a consistency there. That doesn't mean that it's not an Apple fanboyism thing. This is my experience with this particular platform, and I'm not happy.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's steak versus lobster. I mean, there is no right answer. It's just what you prefer and what works for you.
Yeah, I think it really does come down to that. I mean, my steak is certainly better than their lobster, but I mean, clearly there's a qualitative difference here. But it's not really my job to go there and tell them that. I could live by example and have my Mac with me and be working on it, or if I'm with a family and there's somebody in the family using a PC, I could be doing my stuff and they go, oh, what's that? Oh, this is this cool thing I can do. But I'm not going to say, and that's why you should have a Mac, because if you don't, you're a terrible person. So there are degrees of it. I mean, we can show our enthusiasm in lots and lots of different ways, but ultimately, and I think Andy put this best, is that we're talking about huge corporations, and to have this kind of allegiance to a company, it's like having an allegiance to Exxon. But it's cooler. But still, there are no good guys in this. In terms of Apple keeps its money offshore, and we could use that for our tax base. They're using inexpensive labor in China, and maybe that's not so good for some people. And there is more stuff that's getting thrown into landfills because we're using these kinds of tools. And I'm not saying that that's Apple necessarily, but it's everybody. So we all have things that we could complain about if we wanted to. So, again, to have sort of like have this deadhead-like devotion to Apple just seems weird to me, particularly at this point. But I know there are people that will do it, and good on you for supporting Apple. But again, it's at that point where you start to make villainize other people over it. Vilify, that's the word. If you were to vilify other people over these sorts of things, you've gone too far. Particularly someone like Andy, who's clearly knows what he's talking about.
Chris's email address is yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to join you on the hot seat, because I feel like that seems to be the way the world is getting. We all now have a voice that can be heard on the internet and heard by anyone. And so whether it's politics, and that's, you and I have a great time joking about politics, but politics, music, religion, technology, pick an issue of any kind, and there's somebody out there saying, no, I'm right and you're wrong. And I don't think it's a good thing across the board, because in most of these things there aren't rights and wrongs. There are maybe goods, betters, arguably bests, but the best is mine, not necessarily yours. So, steak versus lobster again.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is, I know one of the things that we were criticized on in some of the comments on Macworld, and this Andy's story was originally on Tech Hive, but we linked to it. That people said, and I found this interesting, that people said, I only come to Macworld because I want to hear good news about Apple. If somebody is using a different platform, they're using an Android, I don't want to hear about that. And I don't want to hear about people using Windows. Lex Friedman is doing a series on Windows Phone right now. And fortunately, he's come to the conclusion that he doesn't like it. And so people are a little more supportive. But still, we're getting people say, I come here only for this kind of news. And I think this is part of the Foxification or daily cossification, depending on which side of the political spectrum you are, is where people want their news delivered, the news that they agree with delivered to them. So they come to Macworld because they want us to be cheerleaders for Apple, and we're not. That's not what our mission is. Clearly, we love Apple. We all use this stuff. We wouldn't be working there if we didn't like this stuff. But we do occasionally take issue with Apple over things, or we'll produce something like Andy's article or Lex's article or somebody else's, where they say, yes, I'm an Apple user, but I'm now trying this out, and this is my experience. And I would think that readers would find that educational, instead of saying, no, I don't want to hear that. And, in that case, all you could really say is, well, maybe this isn't the right site for you. Maybe there are plenty of sites out there that will give you nothing but good news about Apple. Check them out. God bless you. Go forward and enjoy. But I just I don't think I'd feel comfortable working for a site where I had to have this position on something and I had to push somebody's agenda. I talk about what I like using and how to use that stuff. And if I don't like something and Macworld wants me to write about it, I'll do that too. And I like reading people's opposing views. I may not agree with them, but I'm learning something along the way. And I think ideally that's what our site and a lot of other sites are about, is learning things and getting different points of view. So, again, if you want to stick your head in the ground and just hear what you want to hear in your own little echo chamber, there are plenty of places to do that, but I don't know that ours is one of them.
No, I tend to think of you, and I tend to think of what I do too, is I focus on productivity, technology through an Apple lens, through an Apple product lens. So, yeah, this is, for the most part, don't send mail, folks. For the most part, I think these are the best devices. That doesn't mean they always are. I'm a big advocate of Gmail. I have an Apple email address, but I don't use it because I haven't found it fully featured enough or reliable. I use iCloud in a limited way, but I use Dropbox. If you can see over my shoulder, there's a transporter back there that I'm working with. SugarSync. I mean, there are all these services out there. Yes, I want to investigate them, and I expect you to investigate them as to how they relate to the Macintosh and iOS ecosystems. But I don't expect you to say, oh, well, Apple doesn't own it, therefore, stay away. That seems so terribly jaded, and you lose so many opportunities that way.
I think you do, and there are sites out there that do it, where everything is viewed through the Apple lens. So if Google does something, there's you've got to paint it in some way that makes Google look bad, or Android is bad for doing this, or whoever it is. I mean, and that wears on me after a while. It's just like, okay, I get it. You've got an agenda. Your agenda is to push Apple no matter what, and play down any bad news that happens to come out about Apple, and get up there on the rampart and defend Apple. And I don't think Apple needs defending. I think Apple has an entire PR department that's really, really good at this stuff. So I don't know that they need to curry favor with journalists who are going to go out there and hold up the Apple flag for them. And it isn't just Apple. It happens all over the internet with different things. There are certainly sites that do nothing but relish in publishing the worst possible things they can about Apple. So if Apple has good news, they're going to turn it into bad news. And again, they're catering to those people who want to hear bad news about Apple, and so they go there. So you kind of have to pick your shots, and as a consumer of information, know where to go. And again, if you want to hear the stuff that just pleases you, then figure that out too, and go there and hang out and be happy.
Yeah, I would tell folks to go over to Tech Hive. You can get the link off Macworld, but go to Tech Hive and read Andy's article. And what you're going to find is it's not proselytizing for Android at all. It's a discussion of the choices he made, why he made them for him. I mean, I read it. I was a little surprised when I heard about it, but I read it and I thought, that's Andy. That's a very balanced, logical article. And so he has not deserved it. We haven't talked a long time on Mac Notables. I want to get him back on, not to even discuss that, but just, Andy is Andy. Andy does a great job with whatever he does. And you're right. He doesn't deserve to be demonized any more than you all deserve to be demonized for taking the approach you do with tech and Apple and all. In fact, that's why I respect you guys. It is balanced. You don't have trouble saying this may not be something you want to touch, or you want to go somewhere else.
Well, I also understand why people get touchy, particularly at this time. I think in the last couple of months, or maybe even longer, maybe since Steve left the company, is people have been a little nervous, particularly those who are really, really devoted to Apple have been nervous about what's going to happen. And when we sort of carried on this this conversation that, like, no, everything's fine, they've got smart people in place, but we saw Forstall leave and we've seen some other things happen. The Maps issue going on. Apple hasn't come out with the next big thing. And I think people are getting nervous, and they get a little touchier when a site like Macworld publishes something about somebody saying, well, look, I'm looking at other options now. And they go, well, no, wow, if even Macworld is starting to crumble. And we're not. We're not crumbling at all. We're just looking at the state of technology as it stands now. So, you know, I would hope that people would calm down and try to pay a little less attention to the various publications that are proclaiming Apple's death, and instead look at Apple's numbers. Continue to look at, you know, what are they making? What have they got in the bank? What's coming up? It isn't simply going to be just new iterations of the products they have now. I expect there's going to come a time when Apple comes out with the next big wow thing, and we'll see a few retractions in the mainstream press where they say, oh, well, I guess Apple's not dying after all. Ha ha, our bad. But, you know, they'll couch it in like, Apple makes stupendous comeback. Well, come back from what? This is a kind of a typical product cycle for them. Every few years they come out with a new thing that people go, wow, that's great. And they throw a bunch of money at Apple and everything's good again. But people, I think on Wall Street and, well, in anything, you know, people get tired of sort of the big guy, and they want to knock the big guy down so the next big guy can take over. And this can happen in, you know, an actor gets too popular, or a band gets too popular. And after a while, you sort of dislike them for their popularity, and you want them to fall. It's just the way we behave. So I understand people knocking Apple, but I honestly don't see that company's in any trouble whatsoever.
No, and those are some great examples. You know, the star that gets too popular, the band that gets too popular. There is something about it. And listen, I will confess, you know, I've been on some discussions on different shows about the way Wall Street treats Apple, and it does anger me, not as much because I'm an Apple fanboy, but because it's just wrong. You know, it just is objectively wrong when you set these unrealistic expectations. You know, if you expect me to fly from here to dinner, you know, somebody's going to be really disappointed, and that's what bothers me. You know, when I see, and as a stockholder, yeah, it bugs me, but just in general, I want fairness all around, and that means for Apple, for Microsoft, for Google, step outside the tech sector for Exxon, for, you know, Procter and Gamble, for whomever.
Well, I think that Apple, I mean, I don't think that Wall Street has ever understood Apple. I just don't think those guys get it. That when Apple was as beleaguered and suffering as much as they were, okay, well, here's an example. I was when I was playing as a musician and sort of sharing that job with being a writer, I was invited to this very exclusive men's club retreat. Infamous retreat. And so I happened to be sitting at this table with sort of the corporate heads of everything in the US. I mean, really, really top level important people. And I, you know, I played the piano for them, and I was having dinner with them because it was that kind of casual setup. And they said, oh, so do you just play piano for a living? Nice guys. And I said, no, I actually write for this magazine called Macworld. They go, oh, do you know Steve Jobs? I said, no, not personally. I know who he is, and I've seen him speak a number of times, but I'm terrified of the man. And they said, well, he's never going to be a member here. And I just thought that disconnect was amazing. You know, it's like, he wouldn't want to be a member here. What are you talking about? You guys are like old style industrialists, and he's the next thing. You guys are the old thing. He's the new thing. And they just kind of went on like, well, he's such a strange guy, and I don't know how that company functions. It's like, you guys, you should know. You're running the world, and you don't get it. And so, I mean, these are important people, and this is sort of that Wall Street connection where at the time, and Apple was starting to come back and doing pretty well at that point. They didn't get it then. Suddenly, Apple becomes everybody's dream team, and And Wall Street is totally behind them and just throwing scats of money at the company. And I think at that point they were too enthusiastic about them. And now they've gone flipped the other way, which is said, well, okay, now they're going to die. Well, no, I don't think it was ever true. Any of their take on it. They seem to get it about a year later from whatever Apple happens to be doing at the time. So I think Apple will do its next thing. They'll be successful. Wall Street will eventually make its way there again. But when I listen to these analyst calls and look at some of the analysis and the number of times these people have been wrong, it doesn't surprise me now that we're seeing this kind of coverage and seeing this kind of reaction from analysts because they just don't get it. Apple is a very unique company. And I don't know that a lot of these analysts and Wall Street types were trained to understand a company like that. This is really a bizarre sort of alien outfit here that I happen to like, and I don't know that I understand them either, but I think they will continue to be successful because of some very basic principles, which is you build really good stuff. You don't turn out crap, and as much as possible, you try to please your customer, which seems really basic, and I wish everybody else in the world did it, but they don't. For some odd reason. I mean, you look at many, many, many other companies, and you say, why would they do that? Well, they're doing it to make money, but it's not good quality. It's hard to use. It's not built well. Quality again. So I don't know. I wish more companies sort of went with those basic principles and thought of customers first instead of their stockholders.
Yeah, track record yep. is a great point. Meteorologists and Wall Street, I'll take the meteorologists every time.
Yeah, they've had satellites. They're pretty good.
Yeah, at least they've got some idea. These other guys seem to be making it up as they go.
Clearly there's some that are really good too. So I don't want to paint them all.
No.
But some of them are. Gartenberg, terrific analyst, really knows his stuff. But there's some others who just go, he should get out of the business.
Yeah. Chris, we got to do it more often. I always say that, but we have to because it's always fascinating. The Mac 101 experiment is continuing. Any other experiments on the horizon for you? That's
sort of the big one right now. That is going to go on for a long time. So, and again, you don't have to tune in right now. Maybe when it's done, a year and a half from now, you can go and collect them all because they're all on the Macworld website. I think /Mac101. Other than that, no. Usual stuff. Macworld is back doing our tip videos every week, every Thursday. Those are out now, so I'm glad to see those are back. The entire staff is participating in that, so we're getting some really good content, like 3 to 4 minute tips videos, but great stuff. And otherwise, yeah, check out TechHive as you recommended. It's not Macworld and it's not PC World. Excuse me. It's a kind of a unique place that you do get to hear things like Andy Anako's take on this, where it isn't Android or Mac. It's really about a lot of different things, a lot of cool gadget stuff. They're going to a lot of these events that some other places aren't covering. So smart people, good writing, quality stuff.
Will do. And as always, I'll have links in the show notes to everything Chris and I talked about. Andy's articles, TechHive, Chris's 101 column, Chris's 911 column, Chris's Twitter and app.net links, so you can follow him on both places and see how he's doing. See the two sides of Chris Breen.
Well, my Twitter account currently non-snark, but again, no promises.
Yeah. What time is it? It could change any minute.
Second, depending on what somebody's tweeted me.
Chris, thanks a lot. It's great talking to you.
You bet. Thanks, Chuck.
Folks, Mac Notables will be back on Mac Voices. This is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. I'm Chuck Joyner, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and for more Apple, Mac, and tech-related shows, including Mac Voices, Mac Notables, the Mac Jury, and the Mac Voices Briefing. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.